Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1982 teen comedy classic, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Now, before I get into my thoughts on this film, I want to go on a little bit of a mini rant on this film's advertising. I get why they put the focus on Spicoli, Sean Penn's character, because that was the breakout character of the film. Sean Penn was the breakout star of the film, and test audiences really, really loved Spicoli. I get it. I like Spicoli. I think he's a fun character. That being said, the way that the film is advertised, especially after its theatrical release, makes it appear as if it's a completely different movie. It makes it appear as if it's a film about Spicoli. And it's not a movie about Spicoli. Spicoli is not the main focus. Spicoli has a decent amount of scenes, and you could argue that he steals the film, but that doesn't mean that he is the star of the film. He's not the star of the movie, and so it makes the movie appear as if it's just some dumb stoner comedy starring Spicoli and about his adventures in high school, and that's not what this film is. So I'm really sick and tired of seeing the advertising, especially now, where you have Blu-rays with just Spicoli's face, or, this lazy Photoshop bullshit with a quote from Spicoli. I'm really tired of that, because this movie is so much more than just a film featuring Spicoli the stoner. Like, it has so much more going for it. It has a absolutely amazing cast. It has some really excellent, just fantastic direction by Amy Heckerling for a first-time director. It has a really clever, witty script by Cameron Crowe, who also wrote the book that the film is based on. And it's just a classic, great movie in so many different ways that don't necessarily have to do with Spicoli. So it's just frustrating, because I feel that people who have never seen the film before, they will get the wrong first impression of this movie if they just look at it and judge it by its cover. And there's no reason for that. There should be a new release that has a commissioned artwork by a big fan or something, that has like the entire cast on the cover, because this is an ensemble film. This is not a solo film starring Sean Penn as the Spicoli character. Anyway, I know it seems like nitpicking, and it really is, but at the same time, this film, I think it's a great movie. Yeah, I'm not a very big fan of this film's advertising, as you can see, for a multitude of different reasons. But I am a fan of this film. It's one of those movies that took me a while to really appreciate it in the way that I do. But I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I kept giving this movie a chance, because ultimately, after the most recent viewing, this has become one of my favorite films from the 1980s, and also one of my favorite films of this particular genre of the teen comedy. I would say it's definitely one of my favorite films of the year of 1982 as well. It's one of those movies that I can 100% see and understand why this has the following that it does. It's a really enjoyable, fast-paced, fun film. It's one of those movies that definitely puts a smile on your face. It's one of those films that, despite the moments where it does take itself seriously, or where it gets a little bit dark, it never really feels like those elements are too far out of place. So it maintains a consistent, peppy tone throughout, and makes for a very fun time at the movies. It also helps that these characters are very strong. They're personable, they're relatable, they're charismatic, they're likable. These are all characters that, even despite their flaws, which some of them are more flawed than others, there are things about them that really do speak to the audience, that really do resonate with the audience in a deep and personal way. And you start to look at these characters not as characters in a movie, but as people, as if you actually got to know them personally, and that's that's what you want out of a film like this. What you want out of a coming of age drama or a teen comedy is you want these characters to come to life in a way that feels natural and doesn't feel forced. And I definitely feel that this is one of those movies that really does nail that particular formula. And it's not an easy formula to create, let alone perfect, especially from a first-time director. Yeah, I cannot sing enough praises for Amy Heckerling's direction in this film. I thought she did a fantastic job directing this movie. Uh, I honestly could not believe that this was her first feature film that she had directed. She had done a short film before this a few years earlier, and then this was her first film, and it doesn't look like that at all. She doesn't look like she's a newbie in the realm of directing. She doesn't look like she's shy or one of those directors who shows potential but is still a little bit too rough around the edges with their first project. No, she looks like she already had like multiple films under her belt, but that's not the case at all. But despite that, she does have this genuine natural talent behind the camera that is just 100% undeniable, and you can see it in this film. This is one of those movies that really could have crashed and burned. Like, this is a film that could have burned out and completely faded away if you didn't have the various elements that are featured in the film, and you didn't have these elements work as well as they do. And one of the key parts of this film's success is Amy Heckerling's direction. She's the captain of the ship. She keeps everything together and everyone in line, and really it is her passion for the project and for the film and for the story and for these characters, and her ability to allow this cast and crew, especially this cast of relative unknowns, the ability to breathe and to also feel relaxed in the set atmosphere that really creates a very genuine, natural performance and look and feel for the entire movie, which is the entire point. She wanted it to be a kind of film that you could see yourself being in, that you could that's close enough to reality that you could actually see yourself in these characters' shoes. And Amy's awesome direction is a big part of why that was something that was attainable when it comes to this particular film. I just cannot sing her praises enough, especially as a first time director, dealing with a cast of unknowns, which this easily could have, like I said, it could have just blown up in her face, because you have this cast of unknown actors or actors who have done bit roles here and there, but no real big names. And you could have had a disaster or just a whole bunch of just mediocre so-so performances that bring the film down and make it forgettable and mediocre as a result. But that's not what happens here. These actors are talented, and some of them have done more work than others, but she manages, through her direction and through her deft hand when it comes to directing the overall project, she manages to really bring the best out of these actors, even the ones that were not as well experienced or were not as seasoned as some of the other members of the cast. And she also maintains a very consistent tone throughout the movie, despite the fact that there are some sequences that are a little bit dark, a little bit serious, like the abortion sequence, and some of the other moments, like the fight between Mark and Mike. Uh, but they're handled in a way that feels like it's at home within the universe and within the overall film. It doesn't feel like they're too out of place, and they don't cause the film to become unbalanced with these darker moments, or these other, sequences that are not quite as funny or as lighthearted. And this is also a film that could have just come across as sophomoric, could have just been even more crass, even more sexually suggestive, but it doesn't really it doesn't really go over the line. It puts a toe over the line when it comes to those things, but it doesn't go too far, and it just finds the right balance of those different elements. And a big part of that is the direction. And also the way the film is shot, from the sequences in at high school to even fast food joints to the mall, the dream sequence with Phoebe Cates. It's a real jaw dropper in more than one way, and it's just one of those movies that just creates this atmosphere and this whole vibe and energy that is just infectious and just really enjoyable. And Amy is honestly one of the biggest reasons why the film does that. But one of the other huge reasons why the film manages to create that infectious energy and atmosphere is Cameron Crowe's screenplay. Cameron Crowe wrote a book called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and it was a bestseller. And this is a film that is based on his book, which I think was based on a lot of true life accounts from him growing up and other people and so on and so forth. And it's his natural affinity to this story and to these characters that really does make this film shine and really does make it soar, because you have a guy in Cameron Crowe who was the author of the original source material, so he already has that connection with the story. He doesn't have to build it. He doesn't have to create it, like some other writers sometimes have to do. Not sometimes. Other writers always have to do when it comes to adapting a story or a novel. And there are a lot of instances out there where a screenwriter comes in and adapts a novel or a short story and makes it their own and does a remarkable job with it. But there are a lot of other instances where you have these screenwriters who come in as outsiders and they never really gel with the story, so then they don't really see what it's all about or really understand it fully. And then you have a lot of stuff that gets lost in translation. Their interpretation isn't really necessarily the best, and you get films that are adaptations of novels or stories that are inferior in numerous different ways to the source material. But with this film, you don't have that, because you don't have that disconnect between the screenwriter and the writer of the story or the novel, because Cameron Crowe also wrote the novel. This film has just so many great notes when it comes to its screenplay. The characters are really likable, really relatable. Even some of the characters that are more rough around the edges, there are certain things and certain traits about them that are good, and that you can see hope that they can actually be or grow up and wind up to be decent people. And on top of that, you also have some really just hilarious lines of dialogue, just tons of moments of wish fulfillment for people of any age, especially people who are looking back nostalgically or looking at their own lives in high school or as teenagers when it comes to these moments of wish fulfillment. And what I mean by that is you have sequences like where Judge Reinhold's character Brad, he's getting chewed out by this asshole customer at his job, and this customer is just taking things too far because he wants a refund for his breakfast, even though he ate most of it. But he wants a refund because the policy for the burger place is 100% breakfast guaranteed. So this asshole thinks that that means if I don't like my breakfast, I get my money back. Which I guess that is the case in the film, and you can get your money back. And Judge Reinhold, he's, his character Brad, he's being nice initially. He's telling the guy, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You have to fill out a form. I got to get my manager, so on and so forth. And the guy chews into him, doesn't let up, calls him a moron. And what I mean by wish fulfillment is Judge Reinhold's character Brad in this scene does something that every single employee at any job who's ever had to deal with customers has always dreamed of doing, has always wished that they could get away with. And finally Brad just has enough, and he just blows up on the customer. He's just like, "Mister, if you don't shut up, I'm going to kick 100% of your ass." So it's just one of those things you're just like, yeah, but then it's sad because he ultimately gets fired, and then he has to do this other job that's incredibly embarrassing with this stupid hat and all of this other stuff. But it's still one of those moments that makes you cheer, despite the fact that it leads to a lot of adverse effects on his life. But it still makes you cheer because it really taps into that part of you where you're just like, yeah, you tell him the customer isn't always right. And it's just one of those things that, yeah, it is 100% wish fulfillment. We wish that we could do that. I wish I could do that sometimes, but ultimately, you can't. But man, there are days where you wish you could. And in this film, you get to experience that catharsis with a moment like that. And then there's other moments too, like the whole relationship between Mark and the character played by Jason Leigh, Stacy, where Mark is this nerdy guy who doesn't have a whole lot of self-confidence in himself. He works as a ticket taker, an usher, a door greeter at a movie theater, and he has this crush on this girl, this pretty girl that he's had a affection for and has had the hots for a long time, but he's never really had the courage to ask her out. And at the end of the film, they actually do get together and they live happily ever after. So it is a lot of that's ultimate wish fulfillment for a lot of shy, guys. And for me personally, I see a lot of myself in Mark. The lack of self-confidence. I worked at a movie theater in a mall, so like I can really relate to him when it comes to that. And it's just one of those things where there's a lot of wish fulfillment in this screenplay, and I think that's definitely intentional, and that's a big part of why it speaks to a lot of people, is because you have those moments. I feel that it could have had a little bit more. Like, for instance, I don't like the fact that Phoebe Cates' character, she really gets a raw deal in this story, Linda. I mean, she has like the jaw-dropping, show-stopping daydream sequence that was a lot of young boys' sexual awakenings. It's really. But other than that, it doesn't seem like that she's really given as much to do as a character, and I really think that she was handled more as like the raunchy sex appeal sort of aspect, because she's the one that's teaching Stacy how to, do a blowjob with the carrot and all of that. And then you have the whole sequence with the daydream where she's topless and so on and so forth, with the moving in stereo track by the Cars. And then there's a few other sequences that she has, but it just seems like there really isn't a whole lot there, and I really would have liked to have seen more. I wanted to know more about her character. I wanted to know more about Linda, and I also wanted her to have a better ending than what she got, because it seemed like she really got screwed. She just settled for some guy, and you're just like, well, that's lame. Like, why didn't the film have her get together with Brad? I felt that both of them didn't really get the best ending. Brad has that badass moment where he stops the robber, played by Mark Russo, James Russo. It's a different, I think it's a different guy. James Russo, but and he becomes the manager of the Quickie Mart or whatever. But it's like, okay, but he doesn't get another girl. He doesn't really move up in life, and that's lame. So I'm like, maybe it's because that's actually what happened in real life with these characters. But even if that's the case, this is a film adaptation. You can take liberties. You can do things differently. And I really feel that it would have benefited from that by having a moment where after Phoebe Cates' character, she breaks up with her boyfriend. Brad actually finds a way to get her to like him, or they share a moment. They share a tender moment together at the prom, and then they become a couple, and then they get together. I really would have liked to have seen that. And I'm probably not alone. I mean, a lot of people are like, man, Brad got it so rough. Like, and the only really thing that he got was that daydream. But he didn't even get any in that. And then at the end, even with that daydream, it has a bad consequence for him. Because he gets caught jerking it by Phoebe Cates. By Linda. But yeah, I felt that both of them could have used a little bit of a better ending, and so could have, Mike. I mean, Mike just gets busted for scalping tickets and goes to prison. Like, what? I do not like the ending of this movie in terms of the end credits with the what did they do later in their lives? I don't like that. I don't think that was necessary anyway. I think they should have just left it more open-ended, up to people's personal interpretation. And it looked really rushed, and I think it was. I don't think there was a lot of thought put into it at all. But that's just me personally. Then you have the whole thing with Spicoli too, where he saves Brooke Shields, but then he blows all of his reward money on hiring Van Halen for his birthday party. But that's one that actually was kind of funny, so I'm okay with that, because I could totally see Spicoli doing that. But the other stuff, I mean, other than Mark and Stacy, everyone else really got a raw deal when it comes to what they ultimately went on to do in their lives. And I just think that's lame. That's easily the lamest thing about the movie and the screenplay for me personally. But for the most part, I think this really is a stellar script. From the characterization to the moments where it does have some genuine seriousness. The abortion thing. I like how Mike Damone is a character who's portrayed as this guy who knows it all. He's Rico Suave, he's like the guy who is the main person in high school that every other guy looks up to, and every other guy asks him for advice on how to get the ladies and how to make the best impression and how to be popular. But as the film goes on, his thin veneer is pulled away, and you see who he really is, and you see that he's just as vulnerable, he's just as shy, he's just as awkward as anyone else. And you also see that he doesn't have all the answers, and he's also not really that great in bed either. So that's something that I like, and I think that was something that easily could have been overlooked or not even covered at all in the movie. And another thing that I really like about the script is the raunchier aspects, the stuff like the teaching the girls teaching another girl how to do a blowjob with a carrot, and the daydream sequence, and the embarrassments of being caught jerking it. Apparently that was a real reaction by Phoebe Cates. It wasn't an act, because Judge Reinhold was like jerking an actual dildo Like, so she came in and he's jerking a dildo, and she probably was thinking like, oh my god, he actually does have his dick out and he's fucking jerking it. This is disgusting. I didn't sign up for this. But that's not that. But I thought that was a legitimately crazy bit of trivia. Um, but yeah, I just the raunchy aspects. There's not too much of them to the point where it just feels like it's a raunch fest. But there's enough of them to really add this authenticity to this teenage slice of life story where, teenagers, they did that. They still do that. Like, this is not the realm of only fiction or the realm of films. This is the kind of stuff that some critics did not like, and some, parents really hated about this movie. But you know what? That's reality. They did make out. They did have sex. They did talk about sex. They did all these things. It's not something that was taboo to these kids. At least not to all of them. Like, for a lot of kids, a lot of teens, it was just, they were talking about it like it was nothing. And it was refreshing to see a film like Fast Times that was like, yeah, you know what? We are going to go there. Because kids go there. And why do we have to, ignore that? So yeah, other than the whole stuff with the ending and the fact that it could have been a little bit funnier, uh, but then again, I don't even know if this really is technically 100% intended to be a comedy. I think this is, in a lot of ways, like I said, it's a slice of life. I mean, you have scenes that are just simply Judge Reinhold's character Brad washing his car to a song and just having a really good time doing it. And that's the kind of stuff that you would see in a slice of life drama. And I love that kind of stuff when it's done well. It really does make the whole experience of watching the film feel like you're a part of it, because it doesn't feel like it's so far out of reality or something that you could not actually experience. Plus, I also love Judge Reinhold so much. I mean, and especially when it comes to roles like this, like Brad, he does such a good job playing these personable, likable, manic characters who have these manic moments, but also have these moments where they're personable, they're calm, they're cool, they're collected, and he does just such a great job balancing those particular dynamics, and that's not an easy thing to do. And he just you love watching him work as a result. Just him washing his car is a fun sequence because of how good Judge Reinhold is at playing that kind of role. And the only other thing, like I said, there are some moments when it comes to the film where the jokes don't quite land. Some of the stuff with Mr. Hand, I think he's supposed to be, a likable hard ass, but at times he just comes across as just an asshole. I think they could have handled that a little bit better, made that dynamic a little bit different. Um, but yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of serious issues with the script. I think for the most part, it really is quite a masterwork of a screenplay for this kind of movie. I just want to mention a couple more lines of dialogue. There's this hilarious exchange between Spicoli and the younger brother of Lawrence Fishburne's character. After Spicoli has crashed Lawrence Fishburne's car, and his younger brother is just freaked out, and he's all like, "He's gonna shit! He's gonna kill us!" And then Spicoli's like, "What? I'm confused, man. Like, what do you mean? Like, he's gonna shit and he's gonna kill us? Like, which one is he gonna do, man?" And it's just he's like, "He's gonna shit and then he's gonna kill us." So there's just, and then just how Spicoli turns this whole situation around. That is a net negative. He's gonna get his ass pounded by the baddest, meanest football player in the state, and he just turns it around beautifully. It's a really genius moment for such a dumb character to be like, I'll just make it look like the rival high school destroyed and vandalized his car. And then it leads to this just great moment where the Lawrence Fishburne just has this epic game where he's just dominating everybody, and the high school goes on to win the game like 42-0, and Spicoli comes out smelling like roses. Like I love that whole setup, and I think that's just a testament to how good this script is. I mean, that little thing just really goes a long way. Really, it's just a moment of sheer genius and brilliance by an incredibly dumb stoner character. Just shows you he's maybe not as dumb as you think he is. So yeah, great script. But I mean, this script really would not fly and would not be as good as it is without the perfect cast. And this film has the best possible cast that this film could have ever asked for. With Sean Penn as Spicoli. Sean Penn, he's an actor that, to me, I knew him more as a serious guy. I knew him more as an Oscar-winning actor. I knew him more as the guy who was in Dead Man Walking. I did not know him as this stoner character. And when I saw this film for the first time, I just could not believe it, because I couldn't even recognize Sean Penn in this role. And I was just stunned. I was like, it's just amazing to me how Sean Penn went from this to Oscar winner. The only other actor I can think of that has made such a dramatic leap in terms of their acting talent and their ability and their reputation is Matthew McConaughey, who went from stoner character, he went from surfer dude to potentially out of Hollywood to Oscar winner. So he had the same sort of trajectory as an actor. And that's always an impressive thing to see when you see an actor do that and break out of that kind of typecasting. And I could see why Sean Penn became a household name and why Spicoli became this big character and why Universal decided to make him the focus of all their advertising. I wish they didn't, but I can see why. I can see why they shot more scenes with Sean Penn as Spicoli, like the dream sequence, just so you could have more Spicoli. I could totally see it. Like, this is a character that you would see in tons of other teen comedies years later, some different sort of version of Spicoli, from the mannerisms to the way that he speaks, just a lot of ways. For a lot of people, the quintessential teenage stoner is Spicoli, and you can I can get it. I totally understand. But the thing is, Sean Penn deserves a little bit more credit for his performance in this, because he could easily just half-ass this. He could have just been like, I'm just playing a stoner character. He doesn't really have like a ton of lines, a ton of sequences. This is a character who's just there to party and blah blah blah. I'll just act a little stoned and say some lines, and that'll be it. But that's not what Sean Penn did. Sean Penn went the method route. Like, he actually became Spicoli and was like acting as Spicoli even when the cameras were off. So while the film was being shot, anytime that Sean Penn was being asked by the cast or crew to do anything, they had to dress him as Spicoli, because he was actually method acting. It just shows you that even with a role like this, and even for a young, fairly, not necessarily completely unknown, but an actor that wasn't as well known as other actors in Hollywood, it just showed you that even at that point in his career, he took things seriously, even with roles that weren't really that serious. So I think he deserves more credit for taking this role seriously, despite how easily he could have done the opposite. And yeah, Sean Penn is great, but the whole cast is great. Jennifer Jason Leigh is Stacey Hamilton. She has this vulnerability to her that really does stand out and really does feel very natural, and something that could have easily been felt forced. but it doesn't feel that way. There's a certain magic. There's this surreal aspect to her character, as if she kind of as if she walked out of a dream, uh, or some kind of fantasy novel or something, because she has this quality and this sort of this whole allure to her that is, like I said, it's very surreal, and in large part it's due to Jennifer Jason Leigh's ability as an actress. And I really thought she knocked it out of the park with this role, and I can see why this garnered her more roles as a result. But I honestly feel this is still one of her best acting roles and performances, and arguably her best. And then you have Judge Reinhold as Brad. You can totally see why he was cast as Rosewood in Beverly Hills Cop, because this character of Brad embodies everything that Rosewood is about, and embodies everything that makes Judge Reinhold such a talented, young, capable, and charismatic actor, especially at this time. I can't sing enough praises. I love this character. I love Judge Reinhold. I just wish that he had a better conclusion to his arc. I thought it was just a letdown in a lot of ways to what happened with Brad. I mean, it was cool when he took out Russo and with the coffee and, chewed him out and everything. It was a crowd pleasing moment, but once that subsided and you were just left with the cold hard reality of that he was just some manager at a quickie mart, you were like, man, that sucks. He deserved better than that. Robert Romanus, this is a guy who he's scalping tickets. He thinks he's the end all be all when it comes to women, and he has all of these warts. He has a moment where he just really is a total jerk off to a longtime friend of his, arguably the only friend he has in Mark. And this is a role that I think Robert Romanus was born to play, and he just absolutely nails it. He's great here. He does a really good job making this character someone who has these rough edges, but also a character that there's enough there underneath all of it that you can see that he's not just some irredeemable asshole. And that is something that is not necessarily as easy to pull off as Robert does in this film, because you can easily see an actor just take this role and just be like just a suave jackass and that's it. But he lent a certain, I would say, yeah, there was a vulnerability there that I think was that really did help this character come across in a way that wasn't just all of the stereotypes for the suave, overconfident jackass at your local high school. And Brian Backer, I thought he did a really, really fantastic, great job as Mark. I wish he went on to do more as an actor and had a bigger career, because I think he definitely deserved it, because I thought this was a really terrific performance by him. He really did bear everything in terms of his emotions, in terms of weaknesses, and so on and so forth, and just made a character that really felt so wholesome and also so real. And yeah, I can't sing enough praises for Brian Backer. Phoebe Cates, I mean, this is a role that, of course, I mean, this is the role that for a lot of people introduced them to Phoebe, and so there were a lot of guys who had instant crushes on her because of the dream sequence, and I get it. Like, that's one sexy sequence, and I could see why, a lot of guys really wore out their tapes at that particular moment when Phoebe Cates comes out of the pool and takes her top off. I could totally see it. I 100% understand. I mean, you have moving in stereo in the background by the cars, and The stereo was not the only thing that was moving, if you know what I mean. But I still think her performance was much more than that, and that's, like I said, that's why I wanted to see more of this role and more of this character, because Phoebe Cates is an equally as talented actress as Jennifer Jason Leigh or anyone else in the cast, and she's not just eye candy. And I feel that this screenplay, that's one of the weaker aspects of it, is that it portrayed her in a lot of ways as just eye candy or just too vulnerable, and you didn't really see a lot of moments of strength from her, other than the stuff where she's talking about blowjobs and everything, which is still tied into, you know, the sexual aspect. So I would have liked to have seen some more moments of strength from her, and just more moments where she gets to shine as much as anyone else in the cast. Then you have Ray Walston as plays Mr. Hand. I think he did a really nice job with the character. I just don't think the character was written as well as it could have been. That being said, Ray Walston comes in and he plays a great, grumpy, asshole teacher who also has a heart. I think the heart could have been shown a little bit more in the movie, but he still has a heart. And I like that moment where he goes over to Spicoli's house and takes the time to teach him about history. I like that. I think that's a nice moment, and something that easily could have been left out or not even included in the movie at all. You also have Vincent Schiavelli, who plays Mr. Vargas, and Amanda Wyss, who's also in this in a bit role. Forrest Whitaker is Charles Jefferson. This guy's a badass, someone you do not want to fuck with, and it just shows you how talented of an actor Fishburne was even at that time at such a young age, because he pulled it off brilliantly. And this is not the type of role that I would really recognize or know Lawrence from later on in his career. I knew him more as an actor who did the complete opposite of that kind of role. So in a similar way to Sean Penn, he just shows he's such a multifaceted guy when it comes to his performance and his ability. You also have Kelly Maroney, who plays a cheerleader in this. Eric Stoltz, who plays one of the stoner friends of Sean Penn. James Russo plays the robber at the convenience store. Nicolas Cage plays one of Brad's buddies who works at the burger place. Nicolas Cage, though, was originally supposed to have a bigger role in this. He was actually in the running, or I think they were considering casting him as Brad, but he lied about his age, so he couldn't really work as many hours as they needed for the shoot. So he was just given a little non-speaking cameo role as Nicholas Coppola, because he was not known as Nicolas Cage just yet. You also had Anthony Edwards, who had a non-speaking role as well, as one of the background characters. Martin Brest, who he's in this in a bit role. He would actually go on to direct Beverly Hills Cop with Judge Reinhold a couple years later. You have Pamela Springsteen. She's in this in a few sequences. Nancy Wilson of the band Heart. She actually played, I think she played the girl in the car when Judge Reinhold was driving around trying to make that delivery to IBM, dressed like a total goof, total doofus. And she's the one that was laughing at him and got him to like just quit that job and throw the hat out the window and so on and so forth. That's Nancy Wilson from Heart, which is a pretty cool thing, and also ties into the whole like, look at this girl who has the Pat Benatar look, you know, because that was a running joke throughout the film. All these girls that decided to have the Pat Benatar look. One of them actually legitimately looked like Pat Benatar. Like I did a double take and I had to be like, is that Pat Benatar? But it wasn't actually Pat Benatar. It was just an actress who was dressing like Pat Benatar, because that was a thing. That was a thing in 1982. Like young women who were like, hey, I like that look. I'm gonna adopt that. I'm gonna try to be Pat Benatar. And speaking of Pat Benatar, I don't think she's actually featured in the soundtrack, but the soundtrack, nonetheless, is absolutely stupendous with so many great tracks. Somebody's Baby by Jackson Browne, American Girl by Tom Petty. I even like the title track, Fast Times at Ridgemont High by Sammy Hagar. Of course, Moving in Stereo by The Cars. And even songs like Raised on the Radio. I like that one a lot. Uh, we Got the Beat that they use in the opening credits by the Go-Go's. Just a really great soundtrack. And I think it was like pretty big when it came out in 1982. I know Jackson Browne's song Somebody's Baby, it was released as a single and reached like number 7 on the Billboard charts. So yeah, this soundtrack was every bit as big as the film, and in some ways even bigger than the movie when it came out. The film also features some really nice looking cinematography by Matthew F. Leonetti that really does tie into the whole vibe and the whole energy that Amy Heckerling was trying to have for the particular film. You also have some really excellent editing by Eric Jenkins. And despite being a film that Universal had no faith in, I mean, they weren't even considering giving this a wide release across the entire United States. They were just thinking about releasing it on one part of the U.S. because they had no faith in this film whatsoever. But the screenings did really well, so then they spent a little bit extra money, shot some more scenes with Sean Penn, and then they gave it a wide release, and it was a really big hit for Universal. A $5 million budget, and it made $27.1 million in the U.S., and it looks like $50 million worldwide. And if you adjust that to inflation nowadays, that's a really big hit for the studio. So yeah, this is one of those movies that I know this is a long video, but I really like this film, and I wanted to give this film the utmost and the ultimate appreciation that I possibly could for it. It's a movie that if you haven't seen it, check it out. I highly recommend it. I think it's a really just enjoyable, fast time at the movies. It really is. It's just a fast-paced, funny, fantastic film that, despite some of the issues I have with it, I think is an absolute classic. And yeah, I don't know what else to say except thanks for watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.